Every single week, I am excited for Kagurabachi. I want to see where we go next. I want to see how this fight comes to a conclusion. I want to see what revelations are going to come through. There's so many different things that make me excited, and it's been a long time since I've felt it. Weekly stories aren't really my forte anymore. I've lost the drive, the passion, the energy to keep up with weekly stories and talk about them every single week. However, it is different for every single story. Some will have way more pull and way more of my attention than others, and Kagurabachi is one of those stories. For me, this is a story that carries a lot of weekly energy, a lot of weekly pull. The entertainment value is absolutely incredible. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to analyze. There's so much to indulge within, and the community is only getting bigger. To me, this felt like the perfect time to talk about a brand new chapter, because a lot of the questions that I had for the Hishaku, for Shinuchi, for even the Sazanami clan and the old guy Chihiro, they were all kind of up in the air. I wanted clarity, I wanted answers, I wanted something to linger us into the next arc. Didn't have to be full revelations, doesn't have to be exact detailed answers, but just enough to push us over that hurdle. And we finally got it. Not just a little bit, but the whole thing. So let me explain it to you. Firstly, let me give a round of applause to the old man, Chihiro. He has been pain this entire arc. The conniving, sneaky, snaky fella that he is. The way he treats his children, absolute dog water. But his character, what he embodies, what he tries to do, is very powerfully rooted in this arc. I was wondering what type of villain he would actually be, because he's not the strongest in comparison to Chihiro, in comparison to Teleportation Dude, in comparison to even his own sons. Sure, he's got power, but the way he utilizes it isn't really offensively. So, how do you turn him into a threat, and how do you continue to build upon that threat in a believable manner, especially in the face of Chihiro? You make him incredibly intelligent, but also incredibly desperate on his final legs. See, he is basically at death's door. There's no way that he realistically survives this. He's taken one massive fatal slash and a lot of other fatal slashes after it. Dusted. What's important is that desperation coming out. But they don't just ship this off with an empty vessel. This isn't just the old man doing what he wants to do on his final legs. Instead, they add some very powerful value to that final stand. And it comes in the form of Shinuchi. Now, this is the blade that was up for auction. We find out about its seal, we find out the reasoning for the auction, we find out basically everything that you could know about this sword, and even a little bit more. So we know that the Shinuchi has a wielder, a swordsman, but this swordsman is currently locked away by the Kabanabi. They provide very strict protection. Now the Hishaku, which is the sorcery group, want Shinuchi, but they can't technically have it because of this hidden swordsman. So do you see the problem that's arising? If you remember a handful of chapters ago, we actually met the leader of the Hishaku, this very interesting guy that was poking around the auction. He disappeared. He had some very brisk words for Chihiro, but he is the reason why this is happening. So you're probably asking yourself a question. Why would the Hishaku, the sorcerers that stole the swords, put Shinuchi up for auction? One, they get the Kabanabi to bid on it and buy it. They want to find the swordsman and to get rid of Shinuchi's wielder. But two, they also want to create internal conflict. When you have government conflict like that, it's very easy to either use it as a distraction, which is what is explained, or impose upon it to dismantle it in its entirety. The strongest the Kabanabi can be is all together as one moving force, but when you have separate entities and separate ideologies moving within it, it doesn't work. It doesn't function properly. That is one half of the conversation. The second half is that the Shinuchi actually has a seal on it. You know, the big braided rope around the box, that's imposed by the Kabanabi. It's bio-authenticated. Now supposedly it would take a top tier sorcerer at least 10 years to surpass that seal. The Hishaku leader done it in 3. Now, if that doesn't tell you, if that doesn't emphasize how powerful of a sorcerer this leader is, I don't know what would. This is 3 people that are bio-authenticated this seal specifically for this sword that would take 10 plus years to even try and crack around it if it was possible, and this dude has done it in 3. That is incredibly impressive and honestly kind of nerve-wracking tracking. The second part of this phase, however, isn't just to break the seal, because you would think, oh, maybe the leader would want to use it, they stole the swords to begin with, it would make sense. Not necessarily. Because there is a wielder already, because there is a master of that sword, they want to test what Shinuchi is capable of. So funny enough, the old man, Chihiro, is a guinea pig. The Hishaku are using him to test the limitations of Shinuchi when it can't actually be wielded, because one of its very innate abilities is to kind of disregard the eternal contract. It is so powerful that the internal contract that is connected with the swords and the wielders or the masters can actually be bypassed a little bit. That is what they want to see. They want to see what happens. They want to experiment. To me, that is a beautiful way just to show how ahead of the game the Hishaku actually are. Mind you, their presence within the story so far has been minimal. They've been here, they've been there, lurking in the background as shadows, but clearly these people are our primary antagonists. Not constantly, not 24/7, but they're always going to be here. They're the reason why this story started to begin with, so of course we have to drip feed them in. These people too want to wield the swords, but not just in any normal way. They want to take the swords to the next level. They want to experiment, evolve, advance things way past, and potentially mass produce certain variations or versions, and we've seen a snippet of it. The Datanseki stone is a great example that the Hishaku is able to, funny enough, produce. And while it's not complete, it does set a precedent that they're able to understand, potentially manufacture, and replicate a lot of its components. These are very dangerous people. These are very powerful people. The swords landing in their hands is going to be utilized in a way potentially never seen before. I'm glad that they're not desperate to utilize the swords. I'm glad that they're not pushing things further or faster than needed to be. They're taking their time. They're smart. They're moving intelligently, not necessarily discreetly because they don't really have to, but damn well elegantly. Because what you get next is the perfect showcase of this sword. And we also get to see the master of it. So the old man tries to wield this sword, but it is so inherently powerful that he can't unsheath it. It still works. So all the power still starts leaking out anyway. I love how the blood kind of falls out of the sword and pools onto the floor, and then from that blood sprouts a lot of plants, even a butterfly. And that butterfly is a representation of that power. Now the word that the master actually says, Magatsumi, and the only type of meaning that I could find for that word, which I'm sure people will break down more accurately later on, was more so things pointing towards destruction and calamity and annihilation, very heavy on that connotation. I don't want to claim that that's accurate of a translation, but I wouldn't be surprised. This sword is seemingly represented through bloodshed. It's quite literally dripping out of the floor, and that is what the plants grow from. But there's certain flowers that are blackened or bloodied, I should say, and there's other flowers that aren't. But when the butterfly does come out to play, it is this massive, beautiful, huge thing that looks very bloody-esque. Visually, aesthetically, it's a beautiful perspective, and just how it's drawn, the representation of this butterfly, very creative, very eerie too, because you don't actually know. Remember, this is a sword that has not been unsheathed, wielded by a guy that is on his deathbed. This is the tip of its power, and it is still incredibly strong. The old man is basically done and dusted. This whole fight is pretty much at its conclusion, but we're getting that extra step of revelations, an extra step of knowledge and understanding to really propel the story forward. That's what I was most curious about. Where do we go from here? How do we wrap in a new story beat after this auction? And there was a ton of ways for that to go, and I'm glad that it's happening now, that the Shinuchi, Hishaku, and Kaminabi are the central pillars of this whole situation. Now that they're becoming more and more prevalent, and we're opening up the structure of this story and its world to these players, you get a lot more variety, and a lot more things start to become complex. The one person that is trying to track everything down and fight things at its front face value, Chihiro, To say that it is a beautiful combination is putting it lightly. To really throw in a curveball, but to elevate the situation in an interesting way, Hiyuki with Flamebone is currently here. I want her to be a part of Chihiro's squad, even though she works technically for the Kabanabi, which entails her being against Chihiro, but with what we have seen with where her morals lie, that's not necessarily the case, 24/7 at least. More importantly, she has a weapon that can go toe to toe with the swords. Hiyuki and Chihiro versus this sword, and I think it would make the most sense. Shinuchi is very powerful, but it's not at max capacity, and while it is very much believable that Chihiro could verse this sword on his own, maybe the difficulty of this sword and the power spike that it does actually have, mixed with an old man that is refusing to perish, Hiyuki is the one to really throw it in the mix, toss it up in the air, and to have a beautiful duo fight with Chihiro. I think that would be a very great representation of how powerful these swords can actually be in the hands of desperation. Start to finish, entertainment, beautifully drawn, very exciting, but also a ton of valuable information. A lot of stuff that we can chew on, analyze, and really prepare ourselves for the future.